It's after dark when a man climbs the narrow stairs of a country inn north of Paris. Late in the day, he had gone out into the countryside. When the innkeeper reaches the cramped room beneath the roof, he finds a bullet wound in his chest. Welcome to Same Day, Different Century. I'm Zach. Today is July 27th. The man is Vincent van Gogh. He's 37 and has been a painter for about a decade. He came to art late, after unsuccessful attempts as an art dealer, a schoolteacher, and a lay preacher among Belgian coal miners. That May, he had settled in the village of Auvers-sur-Oise, an hour by train from Paris, to be near a homeopathic doctor named Paul Gauchet, who had written his thesis on melancholy, treated artists, and painted as an amateur himself. There, Van Gogh worked at an alarming rate. In roughly 70 days, he made more than 70 paintings. The village church under a heavy blue sky, wheat fields raked by wind, and the faces of the people around him. Nearly all the work now counted among his greatest belongs to the last 2 or 3 years of this relatively short life. Behind that output stood a life under strain from several directions at once. The first strain had a name: Theo. Vincent's younger brother was an art dealer in Paris who had supported him financially for years, sending regular sums that paid for paint, canvas, lodging, and food. Vincent produced and Theo paid, and most of what Vincent thought about the world he wrote to Theo in letters. Hundreds of those letters survive, among the most detailed records any artist has left of his own mind and method. The second strain was recognition, or rather its near total absence. In January 1890, the critic Albert Aurier had published a glowing essay on Van Gogh in a Paris review, the first full article anyone had devoted to his work. That same winter, one of his canvases, A Red Vineyard, sold at an exhibition in Brussels for 400 francs. The familiar claim that this was the only painting he ever sold is close to true, though the Van Gogh Museum notes he parted with a handful of other works and drawings. Either way, commercial success mostly escaped him, and the praise unsettled him as much as it pleased him. He wrote to Aurier asking him to write less, saying other painters deserved it more. The third strain was his health. In December 1888, in Arles, Van Gogh cut off most of his own left ear during a breakdown. He spent much of the following year, from May 1889, as a voluntary patient in an asylum at Saint-Rémy, where doctors recorded a form of epilepsy. What was actually wrong with him is still argued. Bipolar disorder, temporal lobe epilepsy, and the effects of alcohol and poor diet have all been proposed. In September 2016, the Van Gogh Museum convened psychiatrists, neurologists, and art historians to try to settle it. They couldn't agree on a single diagnosis. The closest they came was that he probably suffered from more than one condition at once. By the summer of 1890, those pressures were converging on the one thing that had held everything together: his brother. In early July, Van Gogh took the train to Paris to see Theo and his family. What he found was not reassurance, but a household in trouble. Theo had married the year before. His wife, Johanna Bonger, had given birth to a son that January, a boy named Vincent, after his uncle. Now the infant was ill, and Theo was quarreling with the firm that employed him and weighing whether to strike out on his own, and money was short. Vincent, who depended entirely on his brother, appears to have understood that the source of his support was unsteady. His whole life ran on a single arrangement. Theo's money bought him the time to paint, and the painting justified the money. If Theo faltered, both halves collapsed at once. Vincent returned to Auvers deeply concerned about Theo's situation and his own dependence on him. His letters from those final weeks carry the burden. He wrote about the strain on the household and about feeling that the ground under his own life was giving way. He wrote that Gauchet, the doctor meant to watch over him, struck him as sicker than himself. A draft letter to Theo, found in his pocket afterward, spoke of work and the shakiness of everything around it. On Sunday, July 27th, he went out to paint and did not come back for the evening meal. He returned after dark, wounded by a single shot to the chest. The innkeeper sent for Gauchet and a second doctor. They found the bullet lodged too deep to remove safely. There was little they could do. Van Gogh was left in his room to smoke his pipe and wait. Theo arrived from Paris the next day and sat with him. Vincent lived about 30 hours after the shot and died in the early morning of the 29th, his brother beside him. Theo later reported that Vincent told him the sadness would last forever, a line so often repeated it has nearly become his epitaph, though it reaches us only through Theo's account. For more than a century, the standard version held that Van Gogh shot himself in the fields, a death consistent with his illness and his despair. In 2011, two American biographers, Stephen Affey and Gregory White Smith, challenged it. They argued that the wound's angle, the missing gun and painting gear, and the improbability of a man shooting himself in the chest and then walking back to the inn pointed instead to an accident. Perhaps a local teenager firing a faulty revolver, with Van Gogh choosing to take the blame. The Van Gogh Museum and most specialists have not accepted the theory. They point to the close-range nature of the wound, to his own statements as those around him recorded them, and to a documented history, including his fear of being a burden, that made suicide the likelier end. The debate has not been closed so much as narrowed. The museum still regards suicide as most probable, while conceding that the exact moment in the field cannot be wholly reconstructed. Another death soon followed. Theo was already dying of syphilis, though almost no one outside the family knew it. He collapsed that October, was hospitalized, and died in the Netherlands on January 25, 1891, less than 6 months after Vincent. In half a year, both brothers were gone. Vincent left behind hundreds of paintings almost no one had wanted to buy. Theo left a widow of 28, an infant son, and that entire unwanted collection. The widow was Johanna van Gogh Bonger, and a crucial part of Vincent van Gogh's transformation into a household name was her work. She had no footing in the art trade, she had been a teacher of English. But she inherited the paintings and the letters, and she set out to make the world see what she saw. She lent works to exhibitions across Europe, placing them where critics and collectors would meet them. She cultivated dealers and writers, and she recognized that the letters were as compelling as the canvases, the record of a man explaining, in his own voice, exactly what he was trying to do. In 1914, she published the first major edition of Vincent's letters. A recent biography by the historian Hans Loten argues that without her decades of patient labor, the collection might have scattered and the name faded. The recognition she built compounded. A retrospective in Amsterdam in 1905 gathered nearly 500 of his works. His color and brushwork ran straight into the next generation, the Fauves in France, the Expressionists in Germany, who treated him as a point of departure. The paintings of his final years, made in poverty and near total obscurity, became some of the most reproduced images on Earth: the sunflowers, the wheat fields, and the turning night sky. A century after his death, in 1990, his portrait of Dr. Gachet sold at auction for $82.5 million, then the highest price ever paid for a painting. The man who had struggled to sell a single canvas had become, by any measure, one of the most valuable artists who ever lived. Every sold-out Van Gogh exhibition today rests on a verdict reached not in the fields of Auvers, but in the decades after his death, when a handful of people, one above all, chose to spread his talents to the world. That same day, different century. I'm Zach. We'll be back tomorrow with another date, another story. Thanks for listening. Hey guys, it's Zach. If you're enjoying the show, please go to the episode description and there's a link where you can text me directly. It's a one-man show. I promise I'll be the one responding and talking with you. I'd love to hear from you and get to know you. Tell me what you're enjoying about the show, hit me up with some recommendations for future episodes, or anything else you want to talk about. I'll see you tomorrow.